In the winter of 1944, the northern coast of Europe lived under the constant hum of war. The air was heavy with the smell of fuel and salt, and the sky was more often gray than blue. In one coastal city, almost erased from maps by artillery and bombing, life persisted only in a basement radio station where a young operator, Corporal Andrei Leskov, worked his endless shifts. His task seemed simple by military standards: to receive and transmit messages, verify call signs, record time and coordinates. The station occupied the cellar of a half-destroyed building, its thick walls muffling the wind and the crashing waves outside. Every morning, Andrei checked the equipment: batteries, tubes, wires. The radio link was unstable. The airwaves crowded with static. The frequencies buzzed and cracked, each signal demanding full concentration. A single mistake in tuning could cost not just discipline points, but lives. War relied on precision, and precision had to be absolute. The city around him was a network of empty streets and broken houses. Those civilians who remained after the evacuations hid in basements and workshops. By day, trucks rumbled through with fuel and crates. By night, rare patrols passed in silence. Everyone knew the front was moving closer, but no one knew from which direction. The radio station was connected to a command post dozens of kilometers away. Orders, artillery coordinates, reconnaissance reports, everything passed through that fragile line of sound. Andrei lived at the station almost permanently. Sleep and duty blurred together. His days flowed to the rhythm of Morse code. Dots and dashes merged into a stream where human voices ceased to exist. War had reduced language to numbers, commands to codes, and fear to the silence between signals. He wrote each transmission on thin strips of paper, rolled them neatly, and passed them to couriers. Sometimes strange interference slipped into the sequence, as if someone out there was sending an incomplete message. Then he would retune the frequency, assuming it was just noise. One evening, as fog thickened over the ruined streets, an unfamiliar signal broke through. It was faint, distant, but repeated at precise intervals. Andrei recorded the call signs and compared them with his chart. They were not listed anywhere. According to protocol, he reported the anomaly to the command post. The reply came 10 minutes later: "Continue observation, do not engage." The signal returned the next 2 days, steady and rhythmic, as if someone was desperately trying to reach an unknown receiver. Andrei could not locate its source. The range was too wide. By the third night, he noticed that the signal always arrived at exactly the same time, 4:17 a.m., when the city still slept and fog covered even the outlines of its ruins. On the fourth night, fatigue betrayed him. His hand trembled, and he made a small mistake while transcribing, one digit wrong. Instead of 03, he wrote 08. The error seemed trivial, but that combination represented the coordinates of an artillery target. The next morning, he transmitted the decoded message as usual, unaware that this would alter the course of events. Hours later, a new order arrived: adjust artillery fire according to received coordinates. Andrei plotted them on the map and realized the fire zone had shifted far north, beyond the city, toward the fuel depots and an old lighthouse. He tried to verify the data, but the line was already overloaded. The airwaves erupted with chatter, interference, and confusion. By the time he restored the connection, the shelling had begun. The sound of distant explosions rolled through the fog. From the crack in the wall, Andrei saw a plume of smoke rising over the northern horizon. He logged the time and continued his shift, convinced he had simply followed procedure. By evening, the truth emerged. The targeted sector was not an enemy position, it was a storage area recently stocked with ammunition for the city's defensive batteries. Yet something unexpected had occurred. Instead of detonating, the shells had ignited a hidden fuel reserve used by an enemy unit disguised as a depot. The error had redirected fire precisely onto that position. That night, no one understood that the operator's mistake had saved the city from destruction. The next day, a massive assault was expected from the west, but it never came. The opposing force, deprived of supplies and fuel, withdrew. Andre assumed it was mere coincidence, another routine transmission buried among thousands. In the basement, the lamps hummed softly, and the air smelled of ozone. Outside, fog swallowed the streets, and the world beyond the walls seemed distant, muffled by static. Andre adjusted the frequency again, waiting for the next signal, unaware that his single moment of fatigue had already changed the fate of a city, a fact that would only be discovered years later. For the next several days, the city existed in uneasy quiet. The radio reports described movement along the front, scattered resistance, and disrupted communications among the enemy. The fog that had blanketed the coast lifted only slightly, revealing columns of smoke rising from the northern hills, the area that had been mistakenly shelled. Corporal Andrei Leskov continued his shifts, unaware that a single misplaced digit had redirected an entire sequence of operations. The command post sent a request for confirmation. The message was brief. Report on transmission integrity for Operation 417. Andrei reviewed his notes, comparing signal strength and timestamps. Everything appeared in order. He replied accordingly, unaware that his miswritten coordinate had already entered official records as verified data. In the bureaucratic rhythm of war, mistakes became facts when written in ink. Outside, the streets of the coastal town began to change. Patrols became less frequent. The sound of distant engines faded. Civilians emerged cautiously from cellars, seeking water and fragments of normal life. The front line had shifted, though few yet understood why. To most soldiers, it was just another pause between offensives. To Andre, it was silence, a silence heavier than explosions. He filled his hours checking the transmitter, replacing burned-out tubes, cleaning dust from the signal board. The discipline of maintenance gave him comfort. The war, reduced to waves and numbers, seemed manageable within those walls. Yet a subtle unease began to grow. The strange signal that had appeared before the one arriving every morning at 417 had vanished completely after the bombardment. It was as if whoever sent it had ceased to exist. Days later, a field courier arrived from headquarters. His uniform was muddy, his boots worn, his expression unreadable. He brought with him a sealed report. The document contained reconnaissance photos, a cluster of destroyed vehicles and fuel reservoirs, at coordinates matching Andre's mistaken transcription. The annotation read, "Confirmed enemy supply point. Estimated loss substantial." Below that, a note. Source: Station 12. Coastal Operator Leskov. It took Andre several minutes to comprehend the implication. The error he had dismissed as fatigue had been interpreted as precision. His miscopied numbers had led artillery fire directly onto a hidden enemy fuel reserve. The destruction of that depot had halted a planned counteroffensive that would have engulfed the city. By accident, he had saved it. But accidents did not fit into the order of war. The report credited him with exemplary precision. Commendation paperwork was attached. The irony felt unbearable. He alone knew the truth that precision had been an illusion, a coincidence of exhaustion and static. Yet the system required narratives of control, not chance. The city owed its survival to an error disguised as competence. In the following weeks, Andre kept working in silence. Messages continued to flow through his station. Coded orders, weather data, lists of casualties. The rhythm of the ether never stopped. But behind each pulse of the Morse key, he heard something new: doubt. If a mistake could save lives, what did that mean for all the perfectly executed commands that had led to destruction? Outside, spring crept over the ruins. Grass began to push through cracks in the pavement. The civilians started rebuilding what remained of their homes. The war still raged beyond the horizon. But in this small coastal sector, The tempo had slowed. The city breathed again, even if cautiously. Andre observed it from the basement window, the faint movements of people, the return of color to a gray world. One afternoon, the power generator failed. He climbed out to check the cables and found himself on the roof for the first time in months. The sky was pale and vast, stretching over a coastline littered with remnants of defense lines. From there he could see the blackened remains of the northern hills, where his error had landed. Smoke no longer rose, only silence. The sea below looked calm, as if erasing traces of violence. He stood there for several minutes, realizing that no one could ever reconstruct exactly how the sequence of events had aligned. Back underground, he resumed his work. Another message arrived, a request from command for a detailed report on his transmission methods. They wanted to replicate his accuracy across other stations. The irony deepened. He copied his procedures carefully, omitting the part where his hand had trembled and altered a single digit. Some truths could not survive documentation. In his logbook, he began keeping a separate record, a private one. He noted not messages, but silences, gaps in transmission, interruptions in static, moments when the ether felt alive. It was his quiet rebellion against the mechanical order of war. Every blank space in his notes represented the unspoken, the accidental, the human. The following month, a letter arrived informing him that he was being considered for commendation. The words felt distant, almost absurd. He folded the letter neatly and placed it in the back of a drawer. Recognition could not coexist with what he knew. The city had been saved not by discipline, but by a slip of the hand, a reminder that even in the precision of war, humanity was written in error. At night, the sea wind whistled through the cracks in the basement. The radio lights flickered, casting long shadows on the concrete walls. Andre continued listening to the ether, half expecting that mysterious 417 signal to return. But the frequency remained silent, as if the world itself had moved to another wavelength, leaving only the faint echo of a mistake that had turned into salvation. By late spring, the war advanced inland, and the once vital coastal station became a forgotten outpost. The city was officially declared secure, and most units were redeployed. Only a few communication officers, including Corporal Andrei Leskov, remained behind to maintain contact with scattered posts. The air was quieter now, the static softer. But calm in wartime was never permanent. It was merely the silence between storms. Rumors began to spread through the command structure. Someone had noticed inconsistencies in the signal logs from the night of the shelling. The report that credited Leskov's accuracy now drew attention for another reason. The intercepted transmissions before the bombardment, the mysterious signal at 417, had been traced to an unregistered source. Intelligence officers suspected enemy manipulation. An internal review began. 2 inspectors arrived at the coastal station. They wore plain uniforms and carried notebooks instead of weapons. Their questions were methodical. Frequency ranges, timing, call signs, verification procedures. Andre answered each calmly, presenting his records and showing the meticulous order of his logbooks. Nothing in his papers hinted at error. His deliberate handwriting had turned chaos into order. The inspectors stayed for 2 days, reviewing his transmissions and testing the equipment. When they left, they offered no conclusions, only polite silence. Yet, Andre sensed that the investigation was not over. In war, truth was often less important than maintaining the appearance of control. His mistake had produced success, admitting it would unravel that narrative. Weeks passed. Letters arrived from the front. More destroyed cities, more relocations, more uncertainty. Andre continued his routines, though each click of the Morse key now sounded heavier. He began to notice the absence of familiar signals, as if the entire radio network was thinning out. The ether felt emptier, but within it he could still hear faint echoes of that strange transmission, the one that had started everything. One evening, while reviewing the maintenance log, he discovered a subtle anomaly. The main transmitter had recorded an automatic frequency drift exactly at 4:17 on the night of the shelling. The equipment itself had shifted slightly due to a voltage drop. The error in coordinates was not entirely human. The machine had played its part. The discovery both relieved and unsettled him. The salvation of the city had not come from intention or intelligence, but from a combination of exhaustion, static, and physics. He wrote the finding into his private notebook, marking it as observation, not for report. Machines, like people, could make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes aligned with fate. In June, a coded memo arrived. The internal review was closed. No irregularities found. The report's closing statement read, "Station 12 demonstrated exceptional accuracy during hostile disruption attempts." The words felt like a quiet absurdity. Truth had been buried beneath efficiency, as often happened in war. Andre signed the confirmation form and filed it away. Outside, the city was rebuilding. Children played among the ruins. New roofs appeared over old walls. Yet the night sky still glowed faintly from distant bombardments inland. The war was not over. It had merely shifted elsewhere. Andre sometimes walked to the northern hills where the mistaken bombardment had struck. The land there was scorched and silent, dotted with rusting fragments. Standing on that ground, he felt both the weight of chance and the fragility of precision. When he returned to his post, he adjusted the radio one last time, searching for that lost frequency. Nothing answered, only the steady hum of the world rebuilding itself. The sound reminded him of a heartbeat, faint but persistent. He realized then that history would remember coordinates, not the tremor of a tired hand or the flicker of a voltage meter. The city would be recorded as saved by accurate fire, not by an accidental misalignment of signal. Andre accepted this as the logic of war, that truth, like sound, could vanish in static. That night, before sleep, he wrote a final entry in his private notebook. Sometimes the only precise thing in war is an error that survives. By the summer of 1945, the war was drawing to an exhausted end. The coastal city that once trembled under bombardment now stood half rebuilt, its harbor clearing of wreckage. Ships returned, carrying supplies instead of soldiers. The radio station, once a lifeline of defense, had become an afterthought, a relic of necessity. Corporal Andrei Leskov, older now and hollow-eyed from sleepless months, was ordered to dismantle it before being reassigned inland. He spent his final days in the basement among familiar wires and dust. The hum of the generator was softer, the light dimmer. He moved slowly, carefully packing equipment, each item tagged and recorded. The discipline of procedure comforted him. It was one of the few things unchanged by war. Yet as he unplugged the transmitter for the last time, silence filled the room so completely that it felt physical. It was the first true silence in years. Outside, reconstruction continued. Streets filled again with the sounds of carts, voices, and hammers. The people who had survived did not speak much of the past. Their stories focused on endurance, not origins. The legend of the perfectly executed artillery strike that had saved the city persisted, told with pride, but stripped of details. The name of the operator appeared in a brief report filed at headquarters, soon lost among thousands of others. Andre received his discharge papers quietly. No ceremony, only a single stamped document acknowledging exemplary service in signal coordination. He left the city on a transport truck, watching the sea fade behind him. For a moment, he thought he saw smoke still rising from the northern hills, but it was only morning mist. Years later, in a different town, he worked as a radio technician for merchant vessels. The routine was familiar. Calibrate, listen, transmit. Peace, it turned out, required the same precision as war. Yet every time static filled the receiver, he felt a strange unease, as if beneath the noise lingered the ghost of that old frequency, the 417 signal that had started everything. Sometimes, when the channel was quiet, he adjusted the dials, listening for it. Nothing ever answered. The official version of events hardened into history. Archives noted that accurate intelligence had led to a decisive artillery strike, preventing enemy advance. The small coastal city was cited as an example of strategic communication. No mention of error, no suggestion of chance. Historians later praised the efficiency of coordination under difficult conditions. The truth remained buried, known only to one man and a single page in a forgotten notebook. That notebook stayed with him for decades. Its pages yellowed, the ink faded. Between technical notes and frequency records lay one short line written in his careful handwriting. "Precision is the child of chaos." He never explained it to anyone. When asked about the war, he would only say that he had listened and that listening had saved lives. In old age, he returned once to the coastal city. It had changed entirely: new buildings, paved streets, a reconstructed harbor. Only the northern ridge remained empty, covered with grass and scattered metal fragments. He stood there in silence, the wind carrying the faint echo of the sea. No monuments marked the event. No one remembered the night when coordinates shifted by accident and history turned with them. As the sun set over the rebuilt town, André felt the same vibration he once heard through the radio, a low hum, almost imperceptible, like a heartbeat in the air. He realized it was not coming from the world, but from memory itself, the sound of chance, the rhythm of a life measured in frequencies. When he left the city for the last time, he carried nothing with him except that faint internal signal proof that even an error, if born of human hands, could outlast precision. The war had ended long ago, but the echo of his mistake still traveled through time, invisible yet undiminished, like a message continuing endlessly across a silent sky.